Thursday BWI Daily Edition means mailbag and practice observations with Nate Bauer, senior editor of Blue White Illustrated. Nate, how you doing today?
I'm great. I'm having some coffee, so that's getting things going and full busy day ahead, right? We gotta love up these spring weeks of when there's actually something happening, because guess what? This is all going away.
Oh,
I know.
Don't tell me. We do this 5 days a week. Don't tell me that. We're going to be getting into one of the things of I don't mind speculation, but then speculation based on already preconceived speculation. That's when I start to go, we're getting a little silly. So
the best ones are why do they wear black sneakers? Move it to let's go blue.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let's not think about that just yet. Let's enjoy the moment. So this morning, quick side note, a little sluggish today here on the BWI Daily Edition, but I didn't make any coffee. So throughout the week, I make enough for my wife and I, and there's always a little bit left over. So I pour that into a mason jar, and I save that up. And today was the leftover coffee day, so there wasn't as much. I didn't realize how much I needed it till I was sitting here in front of the camera going, "Oh boy, what's wrong? Why when I push the ignition button is things not happening?" That's why.
You drinking the coffee's already been made and it's being refrigerated? Is that what's happening here?
Yeah.
Oh no, T. Frank, come on, buddy.
You
can't do that. That's against the rules. That's against the coffee rules.
Listen, I drink really nice coffee. I grind my own beans every single day.
That's what I'm saying.
Once in a while, I can handle some sludge. That's okay.
Okay. I'm glad to know that that's where you were going, because if you were telling me that you're buying nice coffee and doing all of the process and then refrigerating it for the week, I would have taken issue with that.
No. It was a late night last night. I just couldn't bring myself to make coffee. Plus, our coffee is behind all the dirty dishes I didn't get to last night. So It was just a survival instinct. And that, here's another thing. Every once in a while, you need to suffer a little bit as a human being. You need to feel the pain to then feel alive again later. At least that's how I have tried to make it all feel right. When that happens.
The pain of not having your gourmet coffee at hand.
Yes.
That's true human suffering, sir.
Yes.
You are a warrior.
I understand. Yes. And to those people out there who are either listening and don't see the fact that I've got a really big dumb grin on my face, if you're listening on the podcast, or if you don't know what a joke is, yes, I understand that there are wars going on in the world. This is we'll have to ruin the joke so that people understand it's a joke. Anyway, what did you think about last night? What did you hear? What did you see? What were the interesting things to Nate Bauer from Penn State's practice?
Yeah. Okay, so, and this may not be of any interest to people. I don't know. I think that Penn State's punting situation is very interesting. Right?
Okay.
They have because you got to find a new one, and that's been a consistent piece that they've had for the last 3 years, right? So to find a new punter, Barney Amour was brought in from Fordham, and it was an intentional transfer. So he's a walk-on status, but his ability to transfer Penn State, obviously Penn State wanted him, and he was brought for the express purpose of becoming the punter really this year. Right. But he still has to be able to do it. And so I can't pronounce his competitor, Gabriel Nwuosu, his last name. But he's his own thing, right? 6'6", 273 pounds.
Down from last year, by the way, who I think
Correct.
He was pushing 300.
Correct. I mean, honestly, he carries it well. He doesn't look bad for 273 pounds at 6'6". So, but that's interesting. And so we during the portion of practice that we were able to see, we got to watch them punt. And I thought that maybe Nwuosu had the bigger leg, but I thought that
I would hope so.
Yeah, right. But I thought that the process, and this was kind of where I'm going with this, is Stacey Collins was available to us afterwards. And he said more or less what I thought I saw, which was, the consistency and the get off, right? Like that time, the process time of snap to ball being in the air is less consistent, right? And so Amour has a little bit more fluid of emotion. And to me, I thought that I thought that Barney Amour was, again, like we're talking about a couple of reps here, right? Yep. so you're just dealing with initial impressions, but I thought Amour looked good. So I thought that was interesting. They moved on to, we actually, like, to me, I don't know if you can remember this happening otherwise this spring, but actually got to see some one offense versus one defense.
Yeah, that was the first time we got to see that. We haven't seen anything live all season until the surprise goal line stand 2-point try.
Right.
Yeah.
So for 2 plays.
Yep.
So they were both 2-point conversions. Christian Veilleux took one with the second team, obviously, and Sean Clifford took one with the first team, and both were failed conversions.
I did not see what happened on the first one because I was videotaping a part of the play, as we are asked to do, so I didn't get to see what Clifford was doing, so I didn't see how any of that worked out, but I did see on the second one, the broken up pass by Jalen Reed, so that was good sign for the defense, maybe?
I mean, I thought that both and like, what am I talking about here? Both quarterbacks had time to make decisions. Like nothing happened quickly in the play, right? And so, like, part of the 2-point conversion, like if your quarterback is back there evaluating the field, the window's already closed most of the time. And so that was absolutely the case on both plays. Clifford overthrew Malik Mega, but there was nowhere to go with the ball. So that was the case for that one. And then Jalen Reed, it was the same situation. Veilleux tried to hit Dinkins in the middle of the field, and it wasn't open.
Yep.
So no, those were the 2 plays, and then we saw some field goal work.
Do you take anything into account when it comes to who was lining up where with the first team and second team? Because there were some things that were interesting, and I don't know if they're worth bringing up because it's literally 2 reps, and that could have been different yesterday. But I just, there was a couple of situations that with some players either not there or there was, a different shakeup on the depth chart that I thought was interesting. But I don't know if it's worth getting into that particular part of the granular observations.
So I mean, if anyone is prepared and capable of talking about this and explaining to me what's what, it's you.
Yeah.
Keaton Ellis had a teleconference this week where he said that he is competing for the starting dime. Okay. So that was the first time that I had heard that verbalized. And I don't think that they're not locked into positions, right? Like at safety, they're not.
Well, so dime is, and I don't know their terminology, and that's the thing, because like dime could mean their field safety in Manny Diaz's scheme. Dime is also when you go 5 defensive back or 6 defensive backs. So that is that might be a sub package on third down where they take all the linebackers off the field, and Keaton Ellis is then an underneath defender. So that would be another Manny Diaz difference instead of having the traditional, still having your 2 linebackers out there. So that's something I've seen from him on tape, and it's one of those things of what are you doing? Because they've got 4 safeties right now that are scholarship safeties. So are they implementing that knowing they're getting 3 in the offseason, or is that not one of the packages that's making it to the fall? So, I guess that's insight into that.
But I think that the takeaway for me was in that package that they ran, in that 2-point convert. And again, like, is it a one-off or is it something more than that? One, Keaton was on the field with the first team, right? So that's a little underlying storyline that I've been trying to kind of track throughout this spring. Is it just continues to feel to me like he's not being talked about the way, like, representatively, right? In terms of what his likely role is on the team this year.
Right.
If he doesn't start, he's still going to play a ton.
Oh,
and I kind of think he's going to start. I mean, we'll see. But there was that, and he was on the field with John Sutherland. So you've got a couple of right pass defensive in that situation that you would project likely to be run heavy. I thought that they had two guys who could kind of do both. So,
Yeah.
Again, is it specific to that situation, or is that kind of an indicator of where they're going this season?
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing too. And without without seeing the full picture, once again, not to have a cop out here, but like I was on one play, I was looking at Brenton Strange. On the other one, I was
Yeah.
looking at Nick Singleton. So I
Yep.
did not see a single defender in where
Yep.
they were really lining up, other than I noticed a couple of guys that were in there, including Singleton running with the second team. Although Kevon Lee was not, I don't know if he was there or not yesterday.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, as James Franklin has mentioned, players are not there at the beginning and then they come out later. So, I think there was a little bit of that going on yesterday because there were more absences than I've seen recently over the first 3 weeks of the season. Anything said last night? James Franklin gave a little more insight in what the blue-white game is going to look like, and I thought that was very interesting as well. What did he say when it came to what their plan is?
So I thought that the biggest takeaway was that they're not just abandoning the concept of the blue-white game, right? Like, I mean, obviously the event is happening, but two things. One, they just don't have enough offensive linemen right now. That is the reality. Is healthy offensive linemen are coming at a premium, and so when you're trying to put on a scrimmage, or in this case a simulated game, right? In terms of blue-white game, you have to get creative. And I thought it was very interesting what he explained about how the scrimmage on Friday night worked. And this is what I would guess is kind of where he's hinting that they're going, is that they would run the one offense, right, against whatever defense it was, right, one defense or two defense.
Yep.
And then break, right? You break and you do special teams work outside. Yep. So it was like raining on Friday. Do special teams work, come back, run with the twos. And at this point, because you're only dealing with 6 or 7 offensive linemen who are available, you're basically running the same offensive line.
Yeah, which is interesting because you got to be careful of which special teams you're running, because the offensive line is also heavily involved in a lot of special teams units.
Yeah, so, but I don't think that they, again, when you're doing a simulate like a controlled scrimmage, they don't have to be, right? Like you don't need your defensive line or your punt block or your field goal block. You don't need them to actually try to block the kick. Like that's not necessarily a valued part of that. So like, I mean, at least from everything that I've ever seen in practice, when the snap goes up, in terms of like a field goal, when the snap happens, the offensive line stands up.
Yeah.
Right.
So one of the things that James Franklin talked about yesterday that was interesting from a offensive perspective is because we were talking to Sean Clifford as well afterwards, and the focus is on the quarterback, right? And year 2 in the offense and the quarterback knowing the offense. But it's also year 2 for the offensive line. And it's an interesting dichotomy they're in right now, that is this situation helping the offensive line more or less because there's only 5 or 6 of them? That they're getting all the reps, as you just mentioned, like in the blue-white game, they're basically going to play the entire time. Does that help accelerate their integration into the new offense and what they're looking for as far as maybe some new concepts they want to run? Or is it too much? And, I don't know that James Franklin answered in kind of a, well, we'd like to have everyone out there working, but the guys that are getting work are getting good work. So I don't know.
Yep.
And there are players that are important to the future of the offensive line that aren't even here. So it's kind of a mixed bag where the quarterback, I think, is getting a lot of really good work in the second season. And James Franklin talked about this and Sean Clifford talked about this after practice, of the quarterback is feeling like he mastered the offense. Now the rest of the team has to feel that way too.
Yeah. I don't know that there's a right answer. I thought that the biggest, most notable side to it that I took was he seemed optimistic that the scrambling is the wrong word, but the adjustments that they've made to practices and the adjustments that they've made to their approach have allowed all the other positions to not be dinged, right? Like to
not have any negative effects. Yeah,
correct.
And that was really his main thrust of the conversation was the offensive line is one thing, but we've made sure that the offensive line doesn't affect the receivers, running backs, and tight ends from getting their work as well.
Yeah, and I think defensively as well. I think that all of that is important, is to get good reps when you have the opportunity. It's funny because it transitioned so well, but I also spent some time watching Manny Diaz last night and the linebackers, and he was doing it's a ball strip drill, right? Where one linebacker is holding the ball and he's falling into a bag, and the other linebacker is asked to rip it out. And so the first time through the line, the first time everyone did it, all of the linebackers were basically ripping out the ball before the falling action had started.
Yeah.
And so he was, livid is not the right word, but I mean, he literally said, he was just like, hey, we just wasted 2 minutes of everybody's time. Like, because nobody did that correctly. This is right. And so at some point, I don't know if it was John Sutherland or Curtis Jacobs, somebody did it correctly, right? So once they were almost to the back, so the falling action, they were almost to the ground, rip the ball out, go find it and get it.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, that's a live rep. That's a good rep right there. And, at that point, everybody did it correctly. But just speaking to the point of, hey, all of this matters. All of these reps matter in their minds. They do not want to have wasted time, wasted energy, wasted practice reps.
Yep.
And I thought that really, was kind of a good example of their approach on that stuff.
And it's interesting. I don't think this is a part that I think we haven't really ever covered when our observation of practice is that everything is done down to the second. So they go through different portions of practice and everything's segmented out by what they want to work on, and we usually get to see ball security drills, whether it's on offense or defense, ball disruption, all that stuff, and there's somebody in the background keeping time, giving you 60 seconds until 15 whatever, and then they blow the horn and everyone runs to a new circuit. So all of this stuff is down to the second as far as how it's timed, how it's structured, and how much they want to squeeze all of that production out of those drills and out of those periods, because you only get so much time with the actual coaches in the coaching. You need to maximize that as much as possible. So there's a lot of thought and there's a lot of structure that goes into all that stuff as well. We have got to get to the questions today, though, Neb. We got a lot of good ones here today. So as always, if you want to get a question here on the BWI Mailbag Show, the best way is to sign up for Blue White Illustrated over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Be a part of the Lions Den message board. After practice, right as I'm throwing myself onto the couch, I'll throw a tweet up and a message board post where you get to ask questions on the show. And if you are a Lions Den message board member, we get your question on the air. If you follow on Twitter at Thomas Frank Carr when I post the message, you can get your question on there as well, but we always make sure we get to the ones over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. $1. There is no reason for you not to get in on the action. 12 months, by the way. $1 for 12 months. Nate, in 12 months, in 12 months, how much is cheese going to cost?
I don't know the cost of cheese as it is. I'm not a big cheese eater.
Okay.
So I don't know.
All right. I thought it was...
It's a value. If that's what you're saying, it's a value. Get in now. Exactly
what I'm saying. It's not going to go up. It's not going to go down. It's going to be $1 for 12 months. Okay, so let's get to the questions today. This one's from NH Penn Stater 1. I'm going to assume that's New Hampshire. Coach Franklin touched on the possibility of more players transferring out after spring ball in his post-practice availability. My question is, how severe do you guys expect that to be? Any hunches of who, how many, or whether it be significant enough to require immediate emergency replacements before the season in the portal? Can't wait to hear Nate's reaction on this one. Lots of speculation involved, just the way he likes it. So, Nate, I am going to not only do that, but I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, man. Look, so when I see transfers in two realms, right? I see transfers that happen because a player's not a fit. And that can mean a variety of things, but it just means that on the field, off the field, whatever it is, they don't mesh with the program. That's right. Like they don't have a future. They're not going to work themselves into the lineup, or there are off field issues that just culturally don't fit.
Yep.
So I see that as being one thing, and I would have a hard time believing that, and I could be wrong, but like those are quote unquote carefrontations, right? Where that typically happens after the season. So hey, this year just went by, it's not working out. You can stay, but just know that you're probably spinning your wheels by remaining here. I don't see much of that, and certainly the way that James Franklin painted it last night, I don't think Penn State wants anybody to leave. Right? Like I don't think that's a situation that Penn State would be initiating. The second that happens, and typically does happen after spring ball, is players who believe that the clock is ticking. Right? The time is running out on their opportunities to participate and to take on a starring role. Like, and again, like this is maybe a good example, and I hate to use his name because I don't want to suggest that this is in any way real. But let's say that Keaton Ellis wasn't in their plans. Right. That competes in throughout spring ball, had a role last year, but not a starting role. And then this, right, the senior year, and he would still have a super senior year available to him. But in his senior year, if it became clear that Jalen Reed and Zakee Wheatley had both passed him on the depth chart this spring, coming out of the spring, like at that point, you wouldn't be surprised by a situation like that. And I don't see a ton of that on Penn State's roster. Like I don't see a ton of fourth or fifth year guys who,
because they've already left.
That's what I'm saying.
They've already left.
Like they're already gone. So they're like, when Tommy Stevens left, like what have you? I just don't see when Will Levis left, right? Like Will Levis left after a season. And again, like that wasn't after a spring. He already knew that. He already knew that Sean Clifford was coming back, and there was no direct avenue for him to, like, other than the chance that he could beat out Sean Clifford in spring ball. Like he didn't want to leave it up to that chance. And so I don't necessarily see that on this roster.
So I guess the only part I would add to that, because I think you summed that up really well, is that look for positions where there's an open competition, and then who didn't win the job may inform who you might look at as somebody that transfers. And that, I think you paint a good picture of the players that would be more apt to transfer than the ones that don't. So there's a couple of positions, I think we all know them, but Penn State, as you pointed out, like, I don't see a ton of positions where there's enough depth for that to be a problem.
Yeah, I think, okay, so like, and that I don't like doing this, but running back is a good example. Like that's okay. So Noah Cain already left, and I think that they would like to carry 5, which they currently have. Okay. So that's not a problem from Penn State's side of things. I have no question that Penn State would like to keep everybody in the room that they currently have.
Sure would.
Obviously, right? Like obviously the early enrollees aren't going anywhere. Is there a question as to Kevon Lee, Keziah Holmes, or Devin Ford? Sure. Like I think, depending on how this spring shakes out and where those guys see themselves or find themselves, the fact that Keziah Holmes didn't transfer after the season
Yeah.
right? That they gladly entered into that redshirt year. I don't know if gladly is the right word, but did the redshirt year and then remained here when Noah Cain left suggests, yeah, like that's kind of a settled issue.
Yeah.
And then and the same remains true. Like if you look across the board, when you brought up open position battles, right? Tyler Elston and Kobe King is a good example.
They're both going to play though.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
Kobe King has no reason to transfer for that reason.
Yep.
What I think is interesting, and this is an entirely different conversation, but part of James Franklin's response about that last night, and I apologize in advance if I'm misremembering this, but NIL is going to be part of that conversation.
Yeah.
Like it really is. There are going to be players who I'm not saying that it will happen that they'll leave because of NIL, but there will absolutely be, I mean, man, I feel like I'm pulling back the curtain here, but there will absolutely be players who could start at Penn State next season who will have conversations, either themselves or their handlers or their parents or what have you, to get feelers as to whether or not there is a more lucrative, like we're talking actual money here.
Yep.
$50,000, $100,000 can change lives. And so if that opportunity is out there, I don't have any question or problem acknowledging that, yes, those conversations will take place. It's just a matter of whether or not Penn State has the infrastructure in place to present its side of it as, yes, competing in the financial space, but also, hey, this learning environment, you chose to come to Penn State in the first place. You like your teammates. All of those things can outweigh whatever those mitigating factors are.
And to me, this is also where James Franklin. So this is something we talked about, I think, last week. Of, hey, do you keep in contact with players that you're not going to recruit because 3 years later the portal they may be ready? It's like you. To me, this goes back to recruiting. Are you recruiting players that want to be at Penn State for all of the traditional reasons? Yeah. Those guys are more likely to want to stay than to go look for the money. Now, you're never going to recruit 100% of one thing. It's not like they're all recruiting Stanford guys that want to be at Stanford because it's Stanford, and that's the draw. It's always going to be a hodgepodge of stuff, but I think I think there's an opportunity to mitigate some of these conversations with the type of player and the type of person and family that you recruit. And it's not perfect, and some players change their minds, but I think you're in a better situation if you're Penn State because you've put in that work to begin with of finding, quote-unquote, the right guys. Moving on to this question from Poncho570. Addressed a big need in landing Damian Robinson from the transfer portal, as he's an edge rusher, now looking ahead to who's in the 22 class to fit the defensive end position, who fits the edge rusher position, and who among the 23 targets fills those roles. So, Nate, we're going to have a football history with T. Frank here, because this is a great question from Poncho, because there is so much confusion about who rushes the passer. So we're going to start with what you know. And what you know is that defensive ends play with their hand in the dirt, and outside linebackers play in a 2-point stance. And that 3-4 teams use outside linebackers, and defensive ends are used in a 4-3 system. And those two things are different. But they're not. So, when we talk about defensive ends, outside linebackers, and edge rushers, and by the way, traditional, like legacy media people still don't understand that this has changed. Everyone runs, I would say, mostly the same thing when it comes to third down pass rushing. You have usually 4 players rushing the passer from the defensive line. And it does not matter if they have their hand in the dirt or if they have a 2-point stance. If you are rushing the passer as your primary objective as a football player, the new designation that gets rid of all of that confusion is edge rusher. So defensive ends are edge rushers. Outside linebackers are edge rushers. if your primary function, and this is where PFF is super helpful to go see what was the guy doing the most. Was he rushing the passer or was he dropping into coverage? So give you an example. Damian Robinson is an outside linebacker is how some teams, kind of characterize him, because Maryland ran a 3-down front with outside linebackers. But on the whole, his primary objective was rushing the passer on passing downs. Now, he was a little bit closer to that traditional 3-4 linebacker that does drop into coverage sometimes. So if you wanted to call him a linebacker, I would give you that one. But 82 snaps, he was rushing the passer, and less than that, he was in coverage. So it's about what is your job, what is your responsibility. So edge rusher and defensive end are the same position, especially for Penn State. There is no difference. It is a terminology meant to end this confusion, but people are still latching onto the idea that guys are playing with 5-down fronts and linebackers on the edge. And if you're dedicating 5 guys to the line of scrimmage in modern college football, you are giving the offense an extra 6 yards of room in the underneath coverage. It is illogical and impossible to run a traditional bear front anymore, like as your base defense, where you've got that nose tackle, defensive tackles, outside linebackers. That is defensive suicide if you're going to run that on a regular basis. So to give you the answer to the question is Penn State recruits edge rushers. So Damian Robinson, Dennis Sutton, Shaka Toney, they're all edge rushers. Some of them drop because Penn State likes to zone blitz, especially under Brent Pry. But their primary objective, and I mean 95% of the time, they're going after the quarterback. So Damian Robinson is coming in to rush the quarterback.
Zariah Fisher.
Defensive end, edge rusher, whatever you want to call him. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, Tarburton, Denai, Adisa Isaac, they're all the same position. So when we talk about the class of 2022, I think Ken Talley is coming from linebacker, so he has to learn how to play defensive end. And genuinely, I don't have a scouting report on him because there was so little translatable stuff on his film to me from what I saw that I couldn't get a informed opinion to give you. So I'm going to learn with you guys on Ken Talley in 2023. Go for it.
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but who was was it Jeremiah Trotter? Who was the coach at the All-American game, the U.S. Army All-American game? That Talley was down there, right? Mm-hmm. And he was just like, he's a natural. Yeah, he had been playing linebacker throughout high school, all of high school, and for that game made the switch to defensive end. Yeah, and excelled. Yes, he was very good. He thought that he absolutely was ready to pick that up. So I don't think it's a huge leap to anticipate that he could become a factor there.
But this year is my question. And
yeah,
I
right.
I would not see that.
Right.
But long term, yeah. And so he blitzed well in high school, and I think that was a part of the profile of he's a natural of taking on linemen and getting to the quarterback. But a lot of his rushes were against running backs. That's how the blitz protection works. So there is no edge rusher versus defensive end. They're both edge rushers. And then in 23, there's a very deep and stacked class of edge rushers in the region. Some of the guys that Ryan Snyder has put in a prediction for, I believe he's put in a prediction for both Mason Robinson, who we had on the BWI Daily Edition yesterday, incredibly advanced player for the position as far as his mental and physical abilities, his pass rush moves with room to grow. And then Jameel Lyons, who at one point was projected to be a defensive tackle, but has maintained his size at around 245. Highly athletic player, another guy that I'm going to get into the film of. He's committing on August 4th, and I believe Ryan has a prediction in for him as well. But there's Desmond Umazulu. Nick Harbor is a 5-star player that is blowing up and becoming famous on a national level. He is from Maryland. I believe Ryan said his sister goes to Penn State, but there's no lock he's going to be a Nittany Lion because of that. Penn State has been in his recruitment. There's a couple other really high-profile players in the region, but that's why we have the BWI recruiting show to check that out on Tuesdays and when Ryan comes with me on the show on Fridays. You can check those out here on YouTube. A great reason to hit the notification button and to always watch the show. And by the way, I should say, not just watch. I always, because I'm staring into camera right now, I tend to forget that we're also on a podcast. which I came from radio. You'd think I would think of audio first, but I love our podcast listeners, and I never want to leave you guys out. So just, wherever you get your podcast, you can also hear all this information from Ryan, who is the expert on these things. I just watch their film when they commit. OC Lion says, James Franklin referred to Mitchell Tinsley as Steady Eddie. That reference concerns me. Does he have the skills to be a number one receiver in the Big Ten, or is he a possession receiver? What should we expect? Nate, I believe we're reading a little bit too much into Steady Eddie, which is supposed to be a compliment.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, if I'm thinking back on times that James Franklin has used the terminology Steady Eddie, it's people who he loves.
Yep.
Right. And we've talked about this before. At receiver in particular, that ability to duplicate reps, to just rep after rep after rep after rep, that what you are going to get, and that what you're going to get is of the caliber that you expect, right? And that you need from that position. So I do not at all I think Jahan Dotson was at one point described as Steady Eddie.
He was Steady Eddie from the beginning. Like, he was the same guy. Yeah.
So now what's interesting to me is how Jahan Dotson evolved into a guy who caught everything.
Yes.
Right. Like that was an evolution for him to where his ball skills became what they were.
Yep.
I don't have any concept of that for Mitchell Tinsley, one way or the other.
He caught a ton of passes last season, and one of the things that James Franklin joked about yesterday was like it was probably illegal to run the ball at Western Kentucky. He has said repeatedly, and this is the part that I think you should have brought up, OC Lion, not to tell you how to ask your question, but like the part he did say was multiple times getting an idea of what it is at this level to be big, fast, and explosive. And he said going through our speed program this offseason is going to really help him. So from what I saw on film, he's fast enough to compete at the Big Ten level and to be a difference maker. But to be a superstar, to take that Arnold Ebiketie route of coming in and being the guy, there is a little more gas in the tank, according to James Franklin, that they see he can be and that's why he comes to Penn State, because he's got the abilities. It's clear on his size, his frame. I really like watching him move. I love receivers. My favorite position is watching receivers because it is the most incredible things that they do in the air. He's got all of that stuff. It just is getting a couple extra RPMs out, making sure that he is the guy that we saw on film at the next level, and I'm not too concerned about that. I think Penn State can work with him and make him fast enough that it, be a 4-4 guy. And I think that's really all it is.
And I think the, it's a little bit different, but maybe elements of this as well is there was Dotson's just the most convenient example here, but earlier in Dotson's career, the conversation from James Franklin was he has to decide if he wants to be a Big Ten receiver. And deciding if you want to be a Big Ten receiver means, hey, you've had this identity as a fast, fluid receiver, right? Who is liked. And Jahan Dotson didn't end that way. He got thick, right? Like he put the work in. There was, literally, like they say it, there was a conscious decision made. Hey, I'm going to commit to this and actually go like the protein shakes, like all of that stuff that is a bear. It is a grind to put on weight when your metabolism is the way that these guys' metabolism is. Yeah. And I think that part of the suggestion here with Tinsley is if Tinsley commits to all of the resources that Penn State has available in terms of strength training and those nutritional aspects, that he can have the speed and the size to not get pushed around, right?
I think this is also
and not get pushed around.
This is also kind of a public motivation thing too, because I'm sure they've had these conversations, but this is also kind of a. I would imagine this is for James Franklin in particular, a tactic that he continually mentions this out loud to us as a way to continue to push him to do those things in a persuasive way, to make sure
Yep.
that he understands it's important. And I don't think that that's any. I don't see a lot of cause for concern here. So that's what I would say, OC line, you should expect. A really good receiver. A complete receiver is the other part that James Franklin talked about. Like, let's also remember that he called him a complete receiver that can do anything.
Yeah, he came to Penn State for one final year to be a big factor in Penn State's offense.
Yep. So Chris Gelso asks, we've discussed that Bo is ahead of Drew physically, meaning, going back to what Chuck Losey said, but he says, but when they are throwing the ball during practice, who looks better? This is a tough one to answer, Chris, for a couple of reasons. We have seen, as we said earlier, we've seen 2 live reps, so I've never seen either of them throw the ball against competition. I've only ever seen them throw the ball to the GAs wearing the brightly colored shirts. So it's a bit tough to answer. Do you have anywhere you want to start with that particular thought?
Yeah, unfortunately, the quarterbacks don't throw the ball during punting work, which is too often the portion of practice that we are able to see. So no, I mean, I don't have an opinion. I would feel like an idiot if I tried to make anything out of the maybe 10 passes from each guy that I've seen over the duration of spring practice. I mean, but you saw, like, whatever you saw on their high school film, T. Frank, which you've, I'm sure, looked endlessly at, it's a pretty safe bet that remains the case for these guys at this point in their career.
Yeah. So I'll give you one observation, Chris, that I saw yesterday just to kind of give you something here. They were doing kind of a leveling drill where you throw the ball over a net, and if you've watched the video, the highlights, Blue White Illustrated on YouTube, Aller had a bit of an issue getting the ball over the net. He kept hitting the top of the net, but so did Christian Veilleux. Prabula was able to get the ball, feather it over top, and kind of drop it over what is a simulated defender on the second level. You can do that, or you can throw the ball so hard that the guy has no chance of getting his hands on it. It's a bit riskier, but like that's what that drill is kind of simulating, is getting the ball up and down, and it's a trajectory thing. But I am not basing anything whatsoever on one drill as far as who looks better and who doesn't look like they're getting it. Again, Prabula has the ability to throw the ball on the run. He's a little more mobile. But Drew Aller can throw on the run. He's got great off-platform skills. So I think it's still too early to say. And everything you saw on film, if you watch T. Frank's film room, I don't think Prabula has a bad arm. I think that's a little bit overstated because it's a comparison factor when you're going against Drew Aller, who's 6'5", 230. Losey's mustache always brings a good question. With Steen going into Alabama, who are the other portal O-linemen that there are to look at, if any? There was one that just left Georgia and went to Florida State. So this is going to be after spring practice, I think. Right, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware currently of where that situation stands. Do they need another one? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't know. These things are fluid, and you can have guys. I mean, especially now, I just cannot stress it enough that things are gonna get crazy. And they're going to be especially crazy this summer because I think, like, it's just, there aren't rules.
Yeah.
And the rules that exist aren't enforceable. And so, like, like we say, the bag man, there's nothing bag man about it now. A business owner can approach without a collective. These things are called directives, and this is for an entirely different show. But they can approach someone's camp and say, hey, I love Louisville football. I love Texas football. We need a position X, fill in the blank. And I just think that you would be a great spokesman for my company. here's $300,000 or whatever, right? And that will be very appealing to people, and people who, I'm not saying it's Penn State, right? Like this evolution has to happen until things get buckled down, which they are not right now. I absolutely anticipate on the broader national college football spectrum to see someone who is in a position to be a star on their current program leave to go somewhere else that they can also be a star and make a bunch of money in the process.
I wish I had a sound effects board, because I would have played the old-timey lightning sound effects and thunderstorms, because the storm clouds are rolling in around Nate Bauer. Let's go to some Twitter questions. And by the way, Amarius Mims, a 5-star offensive tackle at Georgia, who played, in mop-up duty, he transferred to Florida State. So that was the guy I was thinking of. But I think you're going to see more of that, though, and that's what I was alluding to when what Nate spelled out very clearly is, why is this guy transferring? Is it because of playing time? Is it because of something else? You have to ask the question now. There is no solid answer of, okay, it was X, Y, or Z. Okay, if you could ask James Franklin one question that he had to give a straight-up answer to, what would it be? Now, Nate Bauer, I think, can get these more readily than most people. So is there anything you've wanted to ask James Franklin recently to get a direct answer about, and what would it be? Because I have to think for a second, because I have filtered out most of those questions from my head, knowing that I'm not going to get an answer to them, so I just don't think about them too much.
No, I don't know. I think that maybe, and this is gonna sound stupid because I don't know that it's of the interest of everyone else, but I would like to know from the stakeholders, with no inhibition, what college football looks like 5 years from now. And you're not it's not that anybody has a crystal ball and can see exactly into the future and know that necessarily, but like, that's just, and you guys see this, we've done this show, you see me, you hear what I write, or you see what I write, you hear me talk. Like, it is front and center in my brain that college athletics is going through a fundamental transformational change, and I don't know where this is going. And so I would be very, very interested to hear from it. Like, I don't know. I know what the question is asking, right? Was it John Donovan's fault that the offense wasn't good 2015, right? Like, what was working with Christian Hackenberg? Like, what, I don't know. Like, how severe were if you're not beholden to anybody, how severe were the restrictions that Penn State placed on football for COVID? How about that?
Yeah.
Right. Like, that's something that I think most people would be interested in. And certainly I would be interested in is okay, you've got nobody's feelings to protect. How about a straight answer on whether or not you could operate your program in any capacity resembling efficiency, right? Which is the name of the game at this level. Could you do that? And I have some hunches and some suspicions about what the answers to some of those would be. But yeah, that's my bigger focus, and my bigger question for him right now would absolutely be, where does he see this thing going?
Yeah. Here's a question that I've thought about for a long time, and I don't know if it's worth asking either, because I have my beliefs anyway. Are you running the systems you're running because you think they're the best way to win, or they're the best way to replicate production each year, knowing there's so much turnover in college football? So let's give Brent Pryce an example and the defense he ran. Up until last year, they ran a lot of pretty standard, classical, this is cover 3, we're going to run it the way you run cover 3. Know it, learn it, play fast. Is that because you think that's the best way to do it, or because you can plug anybody into that system, and as long as they know the system, you're going to have a certain percentage of success? As opposed to if you're running something like, you watch what happened to Michigan with Don Brown. They have these really good secondary players. They have an incredible pass rush. They shut people down for a year, and then the bottom falls out because they cannot maintain that level of athleticism, because it's just so hard to get right, even if you get the athletes that physically can do these things. Florida State's another example. They ran a lot of man coverage, that whole Dion ball thing. Florida State does not have the profile to continue to do that, and you could see exactly how that went over time defensively. Once the shine of being Florida State and all of that faded, and they missed enough, and they were 5-7 enough, and 4-6, and all those bad seasons, then you're not getting the athletes up front. You're not getting the athletes in the secondary. So, do you run these systems because you believe in them, or because you believe it's the best way to continue to have consistency? And I don't know that I don't know that it matters either way. I think I think it's right either way, basically.
Yeah, and is probably both to a certain extent.
Sure.
At least I would think, right? I mean, it's you're looking for consistency in whatever avenue you think that you can do the best, right? What can you teach the best? What are you most at home expressing and right, like, because again, honest truth, like, players can see through that. If you're trying to implement a system or a style of play that you can't wrap your head around, or you don't actually like, and they're not going to do that anyway. But I mean, I just think that it's a hybrid of probably both of those things that you're suggesting.
Yeah. So PSU 87 asks, trying to feel the juice of these practices from your reporting. What is the level? Does it feel like excitement or anticipation? Are players making great plays and the rest of the team is genuinely fired up for fall? Teams know when they're good. This is actually an interesting thing. You started the season off wanting to know what's the vibe. And I kind of agree with Lions 09 here. Is I don't have a good read on that right now. And part of that is we don't see the part of practice we used to see where there is more plays being made. Again, we just see positional drills and we see special teams. So there isn't that inherent competition. So I don't really know. But talking to the players, it's very business as usual. There is not, I would say, untenable excitement. There's not any sort of drive outside of the normal. We want to be really good at football, and we're doing everything necessary in the moment to make that happen. Do you have any thoughts outside of that?
Yeah, I don't think that you get to make waves in any direction, right, when you've had the type of success or failure that they've had in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So you don't get to say, oh, we're I mean, obviously they're motivated. I don't think that there's any question about that. I think that it's kind of the duck in the pond, right? Everything's pretty quiet up top that you can see, and then right beneath the surface, their legs are paddling hard, right? And so it's just a matter of, you cannot. I think it's interesting that. Maybe interesting. Look, they can only answer the questions that are asked of them, but Nick Singleton, like, there are some players who I don't have any question are impressing and are doing things that people will take note of, but you can't be so far in front of that. You're just setting yourself up for failure, right? Because if it's anything less than an all Big Ten performance, then you've oversold and underdelivered. And so everything that I've seen from the program inside and out this spring, has kind of been, hey, it's grind time. This is where you put the work in. They are optimistic. They think that they can do good things, but this is not a team that is like, hey, we're in a position to prove it. Like, no one believes in us. We're going to prove everyone wrong. Like, you don't get to say
Yeah.
that.
Nor are they
You don't
like,
get
this is our year. We were so
correct.
close last year that we're going to make sure that this year we go all the way because, what you just said. This is a follow-up question to that one that I think is a valid one. John Walker on Twitter asks, this time of year, football fans are starving for information since you and Nate are elite sports journalists. Can you share how to evade the hype train? There have been quite a few players that haven't lived up to the hype. I'm gonna take that compliment and not feel like that's sarcastic. You and Nate are elite sports journalists. I'm going to take that as a compliment. So thank you. That is why I always couch these conversations with this is what they said. And going back to our conversation last year about the offensive line, Juice Scruggs and Caden Wallace, is that all we heard, right, was how good it was going to be. They're these great players, and I said we have yet to see them play. There's more evidence about some of these guys, like Nick Singleton, that injury can always happen, and we will never know the truth of the injuries.
Yep.
But unforeseen circumstances, to me, are the only thing that makes him not a contributor next fall. So it just, I think it's personal opinion. And secondarily, I guess where there's smoke, there's fire. So Olaf Ashanu is another one where we've only heard good things from multiple people about Olaf Ashanu, not just from James Franklin and not just from, one or two interested parties that need something to happen, so they're going to say it the way they want. That's always the part I look for, too, is this benefiting in some way the person who wants us, or is this a belief that they want to manifest into truth, or is this, unbidden and it just keeps coming up?
It takes three to tango when it comes to the hype train. Okay. and what that becomes. Okay. I'm gonna go through the process here because I've got some experience with this. I've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
The first part of the hype train happens when journalists, of which we are, and we are entitled to ask these questions, have questions, direct questions about a player's performance in spring practice. We don't get to see it. So that is our avenue to find these things out. Is James Franklin, how is Adisa Isaac doing this spring? We're all very interested. He missed last year. He was supposed to be part of the equation in 2021. He was obviously an integral part of the equation in 2020. Where is he now? Okay. The second piece, James Franklin says he's doing well. He's doing well. Yeah. He's having a good spring. We have really high hopes for him. He's coming back, and we're counting on it, right? Those two elements are tried and true. They have to happen. Now here, where I'm going with this.
Mm-hmm.
The third piece of the hype train is fans who love their football team and also have expectations and want this player or these players to be highly successful.
Yep.
Process that information, which is very straightforward, right? Question and answer. They process that information as, hey, this guy is all world and better be all world. And if he's anything short of that, then we were sold a bill of goods. That's not placing blame really on anyone. I don't think that it's that, but it takes all three of those ingredients for that to happen. Because here's the thing. James Franklin typically does not, and maybe he does a little bit. There are some open-ended questions, but he doesn't even necessarily bring up unprompted everyone who's playing well, right? Yeah. Like he was asked on Wednesday night whether or not, like who played well in the scrimmage, and he said, "Oh, there's so many guys I can't, it's hard to provide an answer to that." And so the ones that I think that we've seen this spring are Zane Durant for sure, Nick Singleton for sure.
Yep.
Right. Maybe Zakee Wheatley right? Like in terms of like breaking out, but
Yeah.
there's a massive difference between showing up in spring football and performing well in spring football and translating that into repeatable success during a Big Ten football season.
Yep.
They're just worlds apart. And so
Yep.
it requires the journalist and the person receiving the information to be able to understand that and take that into account with those caveats when processing that information.
Yeah, I think that's well said. So we'll move on to this question. From Honest J. Paterno on Twitter, which statement is more true? Penn State's defense will exceed expectations because the Big Ten doesn't have film on Manny Diaz, or Sean Clifford will underachieve again because they have so much film on him. Why don't you go first here on this one?
Oh, boy. Well, I don't like my options. First of all, I don't know what the expectations are for Manny Diaz's defense. I think that's the place to start. Is I would like to know what like are people generally, are the fans generally receptive to the idea that with 7 or 8 starters not coming back this year on defense and a new defensive coordinator after a 6-year stint for the last guy who was, really ingrained in the program, that they're naturally going to take a step back? I don't know, but I think that should be the expectation. Like that's what I'm saying. My expectation is a step back, is a leap back. No, not necessarily. There's still plenty of talent, and I think that Manny Diaz is a good coach, so they have an opportunity to be very good. 17 points a game, good. I don't know. I don't know about that. Right.
Right.
The second thing.
So if there was a strike zone, right? So on average, Brent Pry had a good defense where they averaged 23 to 28 points roughly given up a game. Kind of in line with where the rest of college football is. What about that? Being at that consistency sort of level.
Yeah, I think that it hinges on a few things. I think that the pass rush is a huge part of it.
Yep.
I think getting home is it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And so much of this is it just turns on a dime, right? It's does the pass rush get home? Does it create the disruption that opens up opportunities for interceptions? Are those, we're going to call them risky or like aggressive approaches, but they're not. It's calculated, right? Because you believe that you have the athletes to get it done, and that when that opportunity presents itself, they'll be able to take advantage of it. But you've seen, even for Brent Pry in 2020, how that didn't happen, right? Like games that could have been won. Like we're talking wins and losses here.
Yeah, we're also talking about 2021, where they did enough to win games, but they didn't have the offensive support to win those games.
But okay, so but I'm saying if you're strictly looking at the defense, the conversation changed from, okay, Jaquan Brisker dropped an interception in 2020 that led to a loss, versus 2021, Jaquan Brisker made an interception that absolutely ended the game at Wisconsin. Right. Tig Brown made an interception. I mean, they both made interceptions to win the game.
Right.
But the point remains, those interceptions and being able to make that play when the opportunity came, it's very, very difficult to predict that, but it can be the difference between the points that you see on the stat page at the end of the season.
Yep.
Sean Clifford, I think there is a legitimate point there. I'm not going to gloss over.
Can I pick this up here? Because
go ahead.
There was some stuff yesterday that, so, you ask questions and you're entitled to answer the question however you'd like. And with Sean Clifford, it's all about mastery of the offense, right? It's all about, making sure you know everything. And it sounded a little bit like he's going to have more latitude at the line of scrimmage of, placing a call or two, where previously I feel like it was all very much dictated from the sideline. And that means also going back to like Trace McSorley, where it's been very controlled from the sideline. And I've asked James Franklin this previously, and he said, well, do you want the person in control to be the guy that is the professional, does all this stuff, or the guy that is going to Econ 101, which is kind of a summation of what he was talking about, of like the coach should have a heavy influence in what happens at the line of scrimmage. But if you're the quarterback and you've been here for 6 years, you should have some latitude as a part of the offense on the football field. I asked Sean Clifford, what are you working on personally this year to improve yourself? And outside of mastery of the offense, and he said being a leader, getting to know these guys, being a part of the offense, actually getting to know these 18-year-olds, and he joked about the gulf in age and how it is really a different generation. He didn't mention anything about, like, getting the ball out on time and deep ball accuracy or, any of those things that we've seen from it. We talked about here on the show. James Franklin talked about Sean Clifford in the sense of giving him more support. So I don't think that Sean or James Franklin or anyone sees Sean changing. It's the situation that's changing. So to me, that answers the question. Is I don't think. I was muted for that last part, wasn't I? Great. Yeah. So anyway, we'll pick up with the next question as there's by the way, there is so much stuff going on behind the scenes today. Hopefully we can get through the end of the show because my stuff has been malfunctioning all day long. So not only do I not have coffee, apparently nothing here has any juice either. The last question
I noticed and filibustered at one point, and I feel like it worked out. So
we'll see. We got to get to the home stretch here. So let's wrap up with this one. Does Damian Robinson make a big impact, and how much of a rotation could there be at defensive end? That's from my guy Mud Dog on Twitter. This is a huge thing, Nate. There's no way around Damian Robinson. What you just said about Manny Diaz's defense, getting pass rush, getting home is critical. And Damian Robinson fills in that last puzzle piece, or at least a large portion of that last puzzle piece for the Nittany Lions up front. Is there any other way to phrase that? Like what else do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Certainly they believe his skill set is there.
Yeah.
All indications are that his skill set is there, right? I mean, I think that you were pretty highly complimentary of his film.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they need it. They need it. It's less about will it happen than it is about does it have to happen for them to have the type of success that they want. And the answer to that is yes. So he needs to be part of that equation.
The part that I'm interested in is he rushed the passer efficiently with not a lot of opportunities in 2021 at 235, 240 pounds. Adisa Isaac is listed at 244 right now. So if you're wondering, oh no, this linebacker has to get bigger, again, I'm going to go back to the conversation about edge rusher and defensive end and line. They're all 245 pounds. Like the special ones are 255, 260. Everyone's that 250 now, unless you can get a highly talented player. And that's where I think Robinson, the long-term projection is, I think his frame can support 255. So then you're going to have, in the long term, Denai Dennis Sutton, the number one edge rusher in his class at 255 pounds, solid, like since senior in high school. And then Robinson, who has that ability, 2 top 5 edge rushers in their class. If you can keep those guys together, that sets up a really great baseline for the future. And right now, it's just about getting those guys to being able to contribute in a trio with Adisa Isaac to get the production of at or a little above Arnold Ebiketie. Because last season, it was all Ebiketie, nobody else. This season, it's got to be from multiple angles.
Concur.
Yeah. Well, this was fun.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, like, I think Denai Dennis Sutton is going to be interesting to see. Like, I don't know that you can count on it, but I'm repeating myself. It is there is evidence there that says that he will have an opportunity to be part of the equation.
Yep.
Right. It's just finding that magic formula, right? It's either having the right guys in at the right time where they can succeed, or taking the guys who right now are inconsistent and give you one thing on one play and something totally different on the other 3.
Yep.
And turning them into 3 out of 4.
Yep.
Right. And getting them to be able to duplicate that effort.
And this is where James Franklin made the joke again yesterday of somebody asked him about an easy schedule, and they were talking about Sean Clifford, and he's like, oh, I thought you meant to start the season, where we have Purdue on the road and then an SEC school 2 weeks later. So you don't have a month or 3 weeks to get these guys ready. Somebody's got to be able to get to the Purdue quarterback out of the gate, because, by the way, Purdue likes to throw the football, so that's very important to start the season.
Yeah, I get the sense. I get the sense that he's not thrilled about some of the Big Ten scheduling policies with Penn State.
No, because they thought, you know what? Let's be like the SEC and play these opening games, but also we're playing 9 of them, so we're going to make it hard all the way through. That'll do today for the BWI Daily Edition. Let's not make this any harder. Hopefully my camera gets to the end of this sentence. I think we're going to get there as long as I stop talking. By the way, Brad Mendler coming up, the quarterback coach for Drew Aller. He's going to be on the show tomorrow. We're talking about Drew, his progression, his development, and also the development of the quarterback position. You have to watch this. If you love football and you want to know the what's and whys, he gives us all that stuff tomorrow to round out the BWI Daily Edition this week in spring football. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. For Nate Bauer, we'll talk to you tomorrow.